So I did an experiment, Thursday, with my daughter. She did complete all of her summer work. She started ACE, and they have a policy that you have to hand in your summer work. It gets graded. So I chose not to remind her. I chose to just let her give it a shot, since she insisted, by the way, that she could handle it. I'll give you 3 guesses what happened. She forgot it. She already got a 0 in one class. Her teacher told her she's a new student, new school, this is her only pass. So she came off feeling a little bit like, and she informed me that I let the training wheels off too early. So I learned. But sometimes parents, I don't know, some of you are parents, I'm not all of you, I make no assumptions, but even if you're in a position of leadership, you realize you can't always tell people exactly what to do. They kind of have to make their own mistakes. Whereas I like to say in my house, you have to fall forward a few times before you get hit in the head hard enough, though, God forbid, a little noggin, to figure it out. But that's not always the case. We want to, as leaders, sometimes do, or parents do what we can. We want to guide our children, and even if friends, we see that our friends are about to go off the rails. We want to do something, usually. But at first, when we kind of look at, by the way, this week's portion, we see an interesting story occur. The tribes of Reuben and Gad have decided that they are not going to go into the promised land. And I know, shocking, right? They wanted to settle on the east bank of the Jordan River. Why? Well, there was lots of cattle over there. Great ground for cattle raising. As you can imagine, Moses, being Moses, the guy who struck the rock, who smashed the idols, did not respond with love, not respond in a compassionate way. Rather, we are told that he is perturbed, to say the least. We'll use that fun SAT word. He is a bit angry. And of course, if you were him, you could imagine why. You saw God on Mount Sinai, you marched the people through the wilderness, you're dying to go into the land of Israel, and you're told, no. These yahoos are told they can go. Not only can they go, they have a mitzvah to go, and their response is, I think I want to graze my cattle. So you can kind of see why Moses was, well, not exactly thrilled. We also see that what they say in response, because it's not just that they're like, let's do this. What they say is, we will build here sheepfolds for our flocks and towns for our children. And then we will hasten because Moses says, listen, if there's danger and we need you, their response is, well, that's not good, but we'll come. We will be the shock troops in the van of the Israelites until they've established themselves, their homes, while our children stay in fortified towns. The first thing, if you remember when I quoted the verse from Numbers 32, was that they're worried about their sheep. Then the children. Then everybody else. I don't know about you, if you're hearing something that might be problematic. So, Moses says that's pretty much inappropriate. He goes on to say specifically, rather than render the primary and secondary, first build cities for your children and then enclose your flocks. You're doing the opposite. You're focused on your flocks. You're not focused on your children. So we can see how the leader Moses is struggling, as any parent or any leader or even any friend does. What do you do when your friend is going down this path? Do you let them make the wrong decision? So we have stories. Of course, I think the answer is to a certain extent we have to, but to another extent, what I think is interesting is the ramifications that I think by the decision that Reuben and the tribes of Reuben and Gad were making were something that Moses saw, but they failed to see. They failed to see the consequence of their demand. Moses, I think, really clearly saw, and the Midrash kind of does highlight this, that if they're allowed to go and focus on their own wealth, then what message does that say to the rest of the community of Israel? It also begs the question of where did this wealth come from? How did they get all the cattle to begin with? And the Midrash teaches that they saw it, they wanted it, and so they took it. In not kind ways. They despoiled it. That's where I got the word earlier today. They just grabbed it. And so we see that they were focused, definitely in the Midrash, or the rabbis hit it, because it says in chapter 32 several times, the cattle is repeated. And the Bible then highlights, like I mentioned, that the East Bank is prime territory for cattle grazing and raising. But again, we're not talking about anybody who's thought through the responsibilities and consequences of their actions. They had a responsibility for the state of Israel, the community at that point of Israel, which is why they said, well, we'll be the shock troop. We'll be the ones who go out in front. But how are they going to get in front if they're on the East Bank? We'll come at if you call us, they said. But how could they do that if Israel's already been so damaged? And so what the rabbis also highlight is that acher, other, and achrayut, responsibility, are connected. In that they didn't understand that by making themselves no longer responsible, they were making themselves other than the community. How important it is to recognize that we need to come together and be responsible one for the other. How important it is to recognize that there are in fact consequences to our actions. By deciding that we're going to forget something, or accidentally forget, or deciding we're going to, what does that mean? Well, in my daughter's case, not something that made her feel happy. But in the case of Gad and Reuben, they really had to have a come to Moses meeting of what is their responsibility to the community. And what does it mean to participate into a community? There's other midrashim, by the way. The flip side is that every single person of different opinions needs to come in, because every single person in the community, the diversity offers a voice. Yeah, they do. That's not the point of my sermon today. The point of this sermon is to have us really think about the consequences of our actions, to have us think about the impact of the words that we share with others, to think about what does it mean when we're doing something with questionable intentions, and to realize that in our society that is so driven by how much money you have in your bank account and what you're posting on your Instagram or TikTok or WhatsApp or whatever feeds you got, that's superficial. The Midrash even highlights how the gathering of wealth for wealth's sake forgets that all gifts come from God. And that if we are only doing it for wealth's sake, then yes, we enjoy it. We also find ourselves lonely, without community, and still dealing with our own struggles. The rabbis highlight that knowledge, wisdom, wealth, and health come from God. And in a way, by pulling this midrash, they put it right next to the other ones where they were taking digs at Reuben and Gad. They're also highlighting how Reuben and Gad forgot that everything that they had, even though they took it, also in a way came from God. but it was because of how they got their wealth. They forgot where God was. They forgot their responsibility, and they forgot that they were part of a community. And so while of course we can all be tempted to futty putz on our phones and post things and do and acquire, I think we should also try to remember that we're part of something bigger than ourselves and that we have a responsibility to ourselves. Shabbat Shalom.